You're on mute. Never mind. I'll just go ahead.
Are we doing this all by phone now? This is
Mhm.
Jeanette.
Oh. No, Jeanette, you should be able to join with the link that I emailed you.
Well, I tried that and it just said it wasn't right, but I'll try again unless you want to tell me exactly what it is. And I'll
It's
write it
pretty
down.
long.
I did the one with the green on it and I didn't get anything, but
No,
I can
that
try
doesn't
that.
work. She sent
No,
more.
there's,
So what am I doing, please?
so Jeanette, I just sent out an email with a link in it,
All right,
like about 3 minutes ago.
all right, we'll see if we can get it. I have computer and whatever it is up.
So Dan, to answer your question, I'm not sure what happened. They sent us a webinar link instead of a regular link, and then the regular link wasn't working. And so I was just working with NCTV to try to figure it out.
Mhm, okay.
Just so you know, Dan, on your remote meeting script,
Right.
you have Rich here and you have Jed here. They're not on there just because I didn't realize they were coming.
Okay. Jed, who are you with?
Me?
McFarland.
Oh,
Okay.
Muted. McFarland Johnson.
Thank you.
Katie, it says I'm waiting for the host to and will let me in soon.
I don't know how you want to handle that, Dan. Do you
Okay,
want
I now I see him. I see Dan.
All right, I got to figure out a way to prop this up.
Do I have to call in?
No, I see your iPad coming up. It
Okay.
should work. It says it's connecting to audio.
Okay, I won't touch any buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's asking you if you want to connect to audio, then
It's
you want
saying
to touch
use
that
it,
button.
Call using internet audio, dial in or cancel.
Yes, you want to do that.
On your
Which
computer.
one?
Do not cancel.
Internet
Call-
audio.
Call
Internet
using
audio.
Internet audio. Okay,
And
there's
then
the
you have
audio. Okay, now.
Ooh,
Now you can hang up the phone, Jeanette.
I think it is hung up.
okay, you need
Still
to
echoing.
you also need to connect the video. Next to the mute button, there's also a video with a red line through it.
Oh my goodness, you think I'm gonna find it?
Well, you know where presumably you know where the mute button is.
I usually do, but it's not, I can't see it on here.
She's using her phone for audio. On your
No,
screen,
No, she hung up her phone.
I thought I did.
Mark, can you prompt her to turn her video on?
I
As the
don't
host?
have any control over that, unfortunately.
There's no way, as the host, you can't say prompt her to turn it on?
Nope, it's all on her end on her computer.
It's up on the top on my Jeanette. It's up on the top, the right-hand side. There's the mute button, and there's also the stop video, the share screen, and participants.
I've
All
got
those different-
received live and whatever. I'm just gonna try to get rid of that. I'm mute on this, okay. I don't know, this is crazy. I don't know how to hang my phone up, that's the thing. Can you hear me now? Oh my gosh.
Hear you, but we can't see you.
If you can't see your video, it's on the bottom left of your Zoom interface. It says start video.
Well, on my iPad, it's on the. Oh,
Oh, that's me again. Oh, dear Lord. All right. I'll just do it by phone. So I'll shut the computer off.
Oh, you were still on the phone.
I can't get off the phone.
All right. Okay, let's begin. Everybody else is there? All right. Sorry about that, folks. I call to order the Airport Commission meeting for November 8th. I'm Dan Drake, Chair of the Nantucket Airport Commission. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Arthur Sparrow,
Here.
Jeanette Topham,
Here,
Tony Buscarin,
Here.
Andrea Planzer.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tom Rafter, Airport Manager,
Here.
Noah Carberg,
Here.
Jamie Sansbury. Jamie Sansbury,
I think she's muted.
Jamie, are you there? She's in the meeting. I don't know. No, she's not. She's left.
Left. She's probably going to come back in.
Lily Sylvia, there
Here.
you are. Katie Perales.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Is Nick Darris here? Yes, Nick Darris from
Yes,
Jacobs
sir.
Group.
Thank you.
Rich Lasden from McFarland Johnson.
Here.
Jed Morrow from McFarland Johnson.
Here.
Dan, it appears Jamie's back. I think she's under the picture of Noah with the fish.
Do I still sound like Mickey Mouse or can you hear me now?
Now
We
you
can
said-
hear you now. Thank you. Good afternoon. This open meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment following the manager's report. For this meeting, the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is convening by video conference using the Zoom app and broadcasting on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called further. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public, for when we have public comment, the NCTV staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. It is important to note that once the chat feature is activated, members of the public will need to refresh their YouTube webpage in order to access the chat. I will announce when the chat is open at the appropriate time. The chair and her staff will do their best to address your questions or comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting shall be conducted by roll call vote. All right, thank you. The first item on the agenda is to note again that the meeting is being both video and audio recorded. Are there any comments from the members of the commission on the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes?
Siri.
I beg your pardon? Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes of the November 10, 2020 meeting?
Make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Still can't get the phone off.
Mr.
Aye.
Gaspar? Mr. Gasparo? I'm sorry, and chair votes aye. Thank you. Is there a motion to ratify the warrants of November 18th and December 2nd?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mrs. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We're getting feedback from somebody. We have a list of pending leases and contracts. Mr. Rafter, would you like to go through those,
I
please?
can't get my phone to shut off, so I'm echoing on TV.
Wait, yeah, it's
Is there a
terrible.
chance you can run
You've
over
got
and do
to-
it? Or what can I do to shut it off?
Jeanette,
My
you got
cell
to shut
phone.
off one or the other.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Rafter.
so the first item is a consent to sublease. That's from Jaffe Finance Corporation. That's Mr. Jaffe's hangar. He's requesting permission to sublease hangar number 5. Pretty straightforward. I may have mentioned before, his aircraft does not fit in that hangar anymore. Second is a lease amendment to the Cape Air lease, adding charter services as a permitted use. The next that is pending still is an operating agreement with Southern Airways. And I would like to make a recommendation. I previously asked the commission to waive the $1,000 penalty fee because of the COVID items, but we have been asking Southern now for at least 3 or 4 months minimum to get this agreement executed, and with no luck. So I would like to impose that $1,000 a month penalty to encourage them to get this executed if the commission doesn't object.
When would that start, Mr. Rafter?
I believe we said, and I'm going to look at Jamie, I think we said for December. We could backdate it to November.
Do you need a motion to approve?
I think if we maybe include it as part of the motion for all of these, if that's acceptable.
No, I think it should be separate
Okay.
because it's a different item. First, is there any discussion from the commission? Mr. Gasparo, do you have any comments?
No.
Mr. Buscarin? Ms.
No.
Topham? Ms. Topham? Ms. Planzer?
No.
All right, is there a motion to impose the, what do you call it?
It's the operating without an agreement penalty of $1,000 a month.
I
We
would,
originally talked about it be going back to October, November, and December.
can
That
we
was
do
what
that? Can we do that?
I would suggest November, but it's again up to the commission, but
Well, would somebody want to make a motion to impose the penalty on Southern Airways for operating without an operating agreement?
Since October, I'll make that motion.
Second.
To impose it effective October 1, is that your motion, Mr. McScarron?
That is.
Is there any further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay,
Continuing on, we next have a letter of agreement with Anderson and Krieger for legal services for general matters. We have a contract amendment with Johnson Controls for $2,000 to add to the contract that's in place to replace the alarm panel circuit board. We have a contract with Stantec for $11,240 to prepare a seismic certificate for the control tower as requested in the FAA's lease. We have a contract with Aero Specialties for $42,557 for a ground power unit. The next is a contract with Water Filtration of New England doing business as Colgan for $40,700, and it's for the purchase and installation of 5 POET systems. We don't have an executed agreement back yet. We were hoping to have that, but I would like again to ask the commission to authorize the appropriate signatures once we do have that, so that we don't have any delay in installing these POET systems, if the commission would see fit. The next two are pending McFarland Johnson addendums or amendments rather to some of their task orders that they have regarding PFAS. Next is a contract with Jacobs for $29,038. That's for the redesign and rebid of the fuel farm, as you may recall, and I'll go into this later in detail. We received bids, but we had to reject them. They are significantly higher than anticipated, so we have to repackage that and put it back out. And then we have just 2 other pending ones, one with Jacobs and one with McFarland. The Jacobs is for supplemental for increase in resident engineers for Taxiway Echo, and then the plume identification with McFarland Johnson.
all right. Is there any discussion on any of these items from the commission? Hearing none, we'll handle water filtration of New England as a separate item. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent to sublease with Jaffe, the lease amendment with Hyannis Air Service, the contract amendment with Johnson Controls, the contract with Stantec, contract with Aero Specialties, and the contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering. Is
Mr.
there a
Chairman,
I have a question.
Oh,
Can
hang
you
on a
hear me?
minute. Let me get the motion on the made
Okay,
first.
all right.
Discuss it.
I think
Is there
you skipped the letter of agreement with Anderson and Krieger, sir.
I'm sorry, I did. Yeah, include in that the letter of agreement with Anderson Krieger. Is there a motion to approve those items?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. You had a comment, Ms. Topham?
I did. Is that for, let's say, Jacobs, is that for the same thing that we had done before or not by this Lawrence Lynch? Is this the one that for Lawrence Lynch, or was it also done before by Victor?
No, it has nothing to do with that.
But it's Echo, isn't it, on?
Yeah, Taxiway
I just-
Echo is a contract that we have with Jacobs and Lawrence Lynch.
No, but
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I don't
No,
even
this
know which one we're referring to here.
This is the one, the fuel farm.
Yeah, this is.
No,
a-
I'm not looking at the fuel farm. I'm looking at the one that says reconstruct, strengthen, et cetera.
That's
Yeah,
not up.
It's
That's
not on,
pending.
that's pending.
It's not on the
Okay,
list.
all right. Okay, sorry.
How do you vote? Any other comments? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Casparo?
Aye.
Mr. Drake votes aye. All right, for water filtration of New England, I will entertain a motion to approve the contract subject to its completion in satisfactory form and authorize the chair to sign it when it is ready.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
All right, thank you. The next item are the pending matters. Mr. Rafter, you want to speak of
Yes,
those?
on the first, the home rule petition, NOAA has reached out to our representatives and established a somewhat of a frequency schedule about every other month to check back with them. And we're going to make them aware that recently there's been discussion of our town meeting being moved to the first or second week in June, which is going to have an impact on our grant cycle, and we'll ask FAA for an extension. But this is a perfect example of why we're looking or seeking for that home rule petition. So we'll make them aware of that situation. On the PFAS investigation update, the table is in your packet. We've sent out 76 agreements, and we currently actually have 74 executed. We just got one in. We have 207 samples have been taken out of 71 individual wells. The results are 22 wells non-detect, 29 wells PFAS detectable, but less than 20. 20 homes exceeded the 20, but were less than 200 parts per trillion. 13 homes exceeded the 200 parts per trillion. 12 pellet systems have been installed. 5 more will be installed with the Culligan approval. And 1 system has been winterized. The remaining are priority, and I believe there's 7 of them remaining. And there's 42 residents currently on bottled water. There have been no water connections made to date, but we're making progress. And this month, they're going to be contacting each individual homeowner and working with them specifically. On the water main.
Excuse me, just for clarification, Mr. Rafter, those are the homeowners in the Nobody or Way area, right?
Yes, Evergreen, Nobody or Way, I believe is yes.
Right.
And on the water main, we're going to be pursuing the installation with a trench and fill for the entire length of the project. It avoids the route, will avoid the easements. And McFarland has submitted or presented the concept and proposed mitigation strategies to Natural Heritage, and we're waiting for their review. The water service update, again, as I just mentioned, Evergreen, Nobody or Way, they'll be contacting the individual residents, and they plan on holding a virtual webinar. We'd like to ask if there's a representative of the commission, if you'd like to assign someone or somebody volunteer to attend, we'd be glad to do that. It will, we prefer not to have to go through the public, a posted meeting, but it's simply a small homeowner group that we're going to be talking to and advising what's going to be happening there.
If anybody's interested in attending, why don't you contact Mr. Rafter directly?
Okay. The status report, IRA status report number 7 for November has been provided DEP and should be on the PFAS website as well. November, we saw a lot of sampling, new and ongoing residential, a lot of soil sampling on the release sites on the property, leasehold investigations of surface water and soil groundwater with a geoprobe. Expect results soon, and that could be anywhere from tomorrow to 2 weeks, depending upon how things are transmitted. So we're hoping to get them in the very near future. And we're going to continue to sample and do the step outs in accordance with the MCP, and then in January, working on the draft phase 1 report. That's PFAS. If there's any questions before I move on.
Any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. And there was one other thing. We are working with the town. There was a joint meeting earlier today with the Select Board and Board of Health, and we're working with them and their consultants on the town-wide issues as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
do the results that we are anticipating include the leasehold investigations?
I believe so, yes. Noah's shaking his head, so that's correct. Anything else on that? On the EAR, we sent out links earlier this week to the commission. It's a very lengthy document. There are 2 items that I really need to get to tonight, and that is essentially approving this moving forward so we don't disrupt our grant cycle. And also we need to discuss the preference on a public meeting. Just a reminder, this is a part of our capital planning process with the federally funded projects that we compete with airports nationwide on that basis. So, we need to get this thing moving. As per the direction from the last meeting, the consultant has included the construction of the earthen berm as a preferred alternative and enhancement to reduce ground noise from the South Apron expansion. What is not included is a funding source or the specific schedule for construction of the berm, but it is noted that the berm could be constructed within the time period, and I believe that's a 5-year time period, that I think it has a shelf life, if I'm not mistaken. I know Jed or Rich, you may know that, but it does make a note that the berm could be constructed within the same time period as these projects. So again, I'm looking for approval so that we can move on with the next step, which I believe, and I'm going to ask Jed, I think it's a submittal to an agency. And then also we need to discuss the public meeting preference, whether or not we're suggesting, I think the consultant is suggesting that we have one, and it probably would take place in mid-January, and again be via Zoom, that type of thing. But we can get into that after. Those are 2 items that I'm looking for approval on this evening, and for approval or guidance.
Questions, comments from the commission? Mr. Gasparo?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Rafter, as well as the consultants for the work that you've done and expanded this related to the berm. I think the discussion at the commission level is whether to include as a continuation from our last hearing, whether the berm is committed to as part of this project, or whether it remains something that may or may not happen. My concern, as I've stated, is that we're about to start a very public process. The berm is something that may or may not be constructed, but the environmental permitting is going forward. My concern is that one of the major categories related to this environmental permitting is noise, and that we have a noise study which demonstrates that there will be an impact on the homes along and properties along the fence. And with the project as proposed, essentially the airport is not proposing mitigation for that increase of noise. And I don't think that's, I understand there's cost concerns, but I think that if we're, as an airport commission, going to propose this expansion, that there should be a commitment to the construction of the berm to mitigate that increase of noise to those properties. And that's consistent with the recommendation from the environmental subcommittee. And, I think that this document can go forward if there was to be such a commitment.
I know it's a little bit semantics, but it may not be a commitment, but as I said, it is identified as a preferred alternative. It does discuss the benefits and the reduction of noise. There's a reference in 2 or 3 paragraphs about the noise study and how this berm would reduce the noise to the neighbors and so on. So that's on page 7-44 and the top of 7-45. Again, it's semantics to some extent, Arthur. I just want to, it's not an absolute commitment, but the only thing I think missing is funding and schedule. Otherwise, it does identify it as a preferred alternative and enhancement and identifies the benefits. It also identifies the impacts to habitat, natural heritage, and what they may be if we were to have to address them.
Are we clear about the costs, Mr. Rafter?
I verified with Mr. Lasden today, and as I mentioned in last month's meeting, the mitigation is about $470,000, and the construction of the berm is approximately $620,000. If it's vegetated with shrubs and trees, we may have to add another $45,000. So that could be about 1.135 total. And I'll just please remember what I cautioned at the last meeting. It's imperative that we get a decision this evening, because if this disrupts our cycle for grants, it could potentially jeopardize what the FAA has already programmed for us over the next 5 years or so in discretionary. And I understand the apron is a large project, but if we commit to this amount right now, this is almost double what our share of that project would be. And I don't have a funding source. I will need direction on a funding source if we elect to commit to this.
Mr. Gaspar, did you have another comment?
I did. I would say that almost half of that cost is mitigation that may not be required. So the 468, there's and maybe our consultants can speak to this and have already had discussions with Natural Heritage, but there are assumptions on per acre mitigation being required that may not be required for the project. And if that was the case, then that cost wouldn't be there. So I understand and agree with Mr. Rafter coming at this from a worst case scenario. If it were to be, I really wish that we were further along with, given how long we've been discussing this, in terms of having a better understanding of the cost. But I think that this is crucial for the position of the airport and the airport commission as we're about to start this very public process. And it can be a process where we show sensitivity to the neighbors and commitment, or one where we show that there will be a noise increase and there may not be a commitment to do anything about that. But the project, the $11 million project's going forward no matter what. But there may be nothing that's done about those noise increases. And I don't think that's fair to those property owners.
Any other commissioners have a comment?
I would add, Mr. Chairman, some of those homes are less than a couple hundred feet from where the parking is being proposed for some of the biggest corporate jets in the world.
But we can go ahead with this just without commitment. Then we can do it in the future, right? Given the money, that we have that. Is that our discussion?
That's basically the discussion.
Okay.
But if I may,
Yes.
we're about to start a public hearing process where these abutters and the community is going to, be able to comment on this. And as I said, one of the, main aspects, not one of the primary categories that's being evaluated for environmental impacts is noise. And so it may not meet FAA thresholds in terms of day-night levels and increases, but there certainly is an increase that has been demonstrated by the study that would be done. And I think that, we can start off from a position, I think, of strength and goodwill towards the community for the overall project with a commitment to do this, because otherwise it's left as a maybe, and it's just going to raise a lot of questions throughout. And I don't think, as I said, that's fair to these folks, these property owners. It's one thing to be next to the airport and understand that you have property next to an airport, but it's another when there's an expansion project of this magnitude. So I don't want to beat the dead horse, but that's my feeling, is that the responsible thing for this commission to do is to commit to the noise abatement, as had been discussed for many years, related to, that's why we ended up, it's on the airport layout plan. We've been discussing this for a long time, and I think now is the time to commit to it. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in here, and my recollection of the fact it was discussed at the time the airport layout plan was put together, the most recent one, or I guess 2 ago. And it was talked about in the context that it was a good idea and it should be in the plan, because if it isn't in the plan, we probably would have a hard time doing it at all going forward. We come to this particular juncture of where the airport is, and we have some very significant financial uncertainties. We have Pfas, obviously. We have potentially some issues with the Taxiway Echo project related to the cross taxiways, which could be a significant amount. And the FAA has not thus far said they will or they won't fund that. I think I look at it from the standpoint of balancing our responsibility to the community, which I grant is an important one. But I think our ultimate responsibility is to ensure, as to the greatest extent we can, the fiscal health of the airport. And given where we are in the uncertainties, I am inclined to think that it is not a good idea to make an absolute commitment to it, even at this point.
Chair, if I may, one other financial impact that I don't think you mentioned was, and later in the meeting here, I'm going to request permission to put forward a second supplemental request for our fuel farm of $1.5 million. And that's a project that is critical because essentially that's our golden goose. That's where our money comes from. So that's another 1.5 of our money that we've got to find. There's no funding eligible for that.
Oh, yeah, the point I was trying to make is that there are a lot of uncertainties. That's just another one that is going to require some funding.
That's
And
right.
COVID has obviously hit us in the back of the knees, and we don't know how we're going to come out of that, how fast we're going to come out of that. So it just seems to me, again, our ultimate responsibility is our fiduciary responsibility for the fiscal health of the airport. I would be happy to entertain other comments.
I'm going to support our chairman and Mr. Rafter's formulation of the grant and not require the berm as part of the application.
I'll say I agree with that also.
Jeanette still here?
Yep, I
Oh,
am.
There you go. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to put her on. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeanette. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I kind of go along with Arthur. I understand all the financial things, but I'm just thinking, if we do it properly, isn't it better than doing it, than doing it after? You can't do a berm after, can you? Or can you?
And I'm going to ask the consultant to correct me if I'm wrong here, but if whether it be the subcommittee or the commission at a later point and we find money or determine, we're going forward with this no matter what, you can certainly do that. These documents, I believe, lay the groundwork for that because they have identified it as a project and identified some of the potential impacts. If we were not to include this in here, I think we'd be precluded from it or have to take a lot of extra steps to get to it. So I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier to do this with it the way it's in the document rather than not at all. And I guess to Arthur's point is he would like a full commitment, whereas, I'm asking, if you will, to look at this and at another point with the financial aspects as we get more information and figure out where we are financially at that point in time when this project goes forward.
Anything else?
Just if I may, Mr. Chairman, I see where this is going and I won't belabor it, but if I could, to the consultant, as part of the EAIR process with the inclusion of the berm, would it be your opinion that we would definitively be able to determine through natural heritage the level of mitigation that may or may not be required if it were to be constructed?
Yes, that's Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Yes, Mr. Gasparo, the documents evaluate all the impacts of the berm in the current document. And there,
I think what Art is asking is if we can get a firm answer regarding whether the mitigation will be required if the berm is constructed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we've directly asked that question of natural heritage and we have not gotten a firm answer. It might be considered a temporary impact, which would require less mitigation. If it's considered a permanent impact, it puts us over a 5-acre threshold of impact to this shrub and tree habitat. And that puts you into the mitigation category. So it just, all of the impacts that are associated with your CIP projects that have impact to that kind of habitat, the crew quarters, the marine storage area, would have to be mitigated for in some sense. So I know that that's an important question that needs to be answered. We haven't gotten a formal answer from Natural Heritage. I think we could get a formal answer from them if we press them on it, but they have not been able to give us an answer yet.
Thank you. If I may,
I'm also willing, Mr. Gasparo, to revisit this issue on a regular basis so that it doesn't fall between the chairs somewhere.
thank you. I appreciate it. I guess what I would just hope for would be that, it's essentially a $500,000 question, whether or not their determination comes down that this is a permanent impact versus a temporary impact. So what could we do as from the consultant side of things, as well as the position of the airport to strengthen the fact as we go to them and ask the question to support the position that is in fact a temporary impact. Again, perhaps through a little bit extra work, expanded detail in terms of how that might be planted, beneficial. I don't want to go too far into it, but I guess what I'm saying is before we get an answer that they come back and say it in fact is permanent, can we strengthen as part of, and I'm not saying this shouldn't go forward tonight, but in doing so, as part of this process, is there a way when you approach natural heritage with these additional, as my thoughts, as I mentioned in the last meeting, is that the inclusion of what they would consider to be beneficial species for the planting may help that decision lend towards the temporary versus permanent. And it's I think it's almost half the cost of what we're talking about in terms of the mitigation. So I think that's an important point, to the extent that you think that we may be able to do that, or what that might take.
Mr. Last, do you have anything you can add to that discussion,
Mr. Marrow is better at that one.
Mr. Merrill?
We have been thinking along the same lines. We do want to get that considered a temporary impact. And I believe we've mentioned something about plantings that would be support rare species, the rare moss species in particular in the area. And we have frequent conversations with the people at Natural Heritage about this and other airports. We have a discussion with them this Friday morning regarding the water line across the airport, and we can try to pose the question at that time as well. But yes, I think we can. I will personally review the draft document, the EAEIR, and see if there's anything in that that could be strengthened in terms of our proposal that would make it more likely to be considered temporary impact instead of permanent impact. And we'll continue to press the case with Natural Heritage when we speak with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else on this topic?
Mm-mm.
All right, I guess do you have something, Jeanette?
No,
Mr. Rafter?
Yeah, so Dan, again, there were two parts here. There was the document, and
Right.
Jed, forgive me, I don't know what exactly your next step is, Jed, with this, but we need an approval to move forward with whatever that is. And Jed could probably give us more detail on that. But then the second piece was the public meeting and what the commission's desires are with regard to that.
Okay, well, let's get this out of the way first and then talk about that.
If I may ask Jed, what are we looking for? Approval to submit this, approval, what are you looking for exactly?
Yes, we're looking for your blessing that the document is okay substantially as is to submit to the MEPA office and the FAA as a joint environmental impact report, environmental assessment. It needs to go to MEPA by the 15th, a week from today, in order to get a notification published in the Environmental Monitor a week after that, roughly. And then it becomes an official public document. And we would have the public meeting, whatever form that takes, if we choose to do that, probably in mid-January. And then the comment period would close, I believe it's January 22nd is the 30-day public comment period.
Okay, well, first I will entertain a motion to approve the EAEIR submission substantially as is written and before us. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
No.
And Mr. Drake votes aye. Okay. Thank you. What do we need to talk about with respect to the public meeting before we?
Well, I think what we need to do is hone in on a date and time, day of week. We're looking at a range between January 7th and 22nd, assuming again that it'll be a public webinar type operation. And I guess we would list it as a public environmental subcommittee meeting possibly as well. And then how you'd like to, would you like to identify the subcommittee or a particular member of the commission to work with ourselves and consultant on the agenda? How you'd like to move forward with that?
Okay, first we need to come up with a date. You're saying the week's the 11th and 18th of January?
This between the 7th and 22nd, so,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever that is.
Ideally, the week of the 11th.
Okay. We have a commission meeting on the 12th. So it shouldn't be that day. I think that anytime, I think the Wednesday or Thursday of that week is best. If that makes sense to everybody else. I don't think anybody's traveling, are they?
Only to the eye doctor.
Is this typically a commission meeting? Is that
It would
what
have to be, it'd have to be posted as such.
Yeah, okay. So, Dan, I don't know if you want to look at time of day, but typically the select board meets on the Wednesdays,
Right.
if you're interested in that time frame,
And
or
I-
if you want to do.
Yeah, I think that later in the evening, even the 5 o'clock time, 4:30, 5 o'clock is
Preferable, yeah.
probably the best.
So maybe we should.
So
look
let's
at-
say the 14th at 5 o'clock. Okay for everybody?
Yeah, we'll just check to see if technology can accommodate us there.
Right.
We'll have to also check with the FAA and the MIPA office to make sure that works for them.
Okay.
Okay, and in terms of coordinating the agenda, do you want us to work with Arthur as the chair?
Arthur, would you volunteer to do that?
Sure.
Thank you. Or would you be volunteered to do it? Okay, all right, Mr. Rafter?
Next, we have the airport lighting policy. It's in your packet for consideration and approval. Our draft policy references a bug classification, and that actually is something that's been developed by the International Dark Skies Association in conjunction with the, Illuminating Engineers group. And they developed a model lighting ordinance, which is the bug classification, basically. And that's what we refer to in our the draft policy there. So it is directly related to the dark skies. We don't mention the town bylaw, but again, this is in my research, it indicates that the MLO, or as they call it, a model lighting ordinance, was developed to help municipalities develop outdoor lighting standards. So that's why we're referring back to this. So I'd like to ask for your approval on that policy.
Are there comments?
I would just add, would it hurt to add an additional line that also references, since we do have a local bylaw as a, town board, to show that we're also respectful of that?
Yeah, I would suggest maybe it's coordination or whatever. I just don't want to get into which one overrules the other, if you know.
Well, I think the bylaw probably is controlling, but maybe isn't for safety reasons. I think the bylaw more relates to something that's an issue here, which is the light shining above a certain elevation, as I recall, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Well, I think there should be a reference in here. Unfortunately, I can't get to my copy right now.
I think, and I'm going to ask, no, I think we could bring this back next month after we look at that and see how we can reference it,
Let's do that.
because there's no
Chapter
project
102,
I'm sorry, Mr. Gasparo?
chapter 102 of the bylaw.
bylaws.
Yeah.
Let us
Well, we
take a look at that, and we'll bring this back at the next meeting, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, under finance, I met with Crosswinds ownership last week, and I just received an email. I haven't even had a chance to look at it, but we should be getting very close to some agreement as to how we're going to address their consideration for the COVID and the losses they've suffered. So hopefully I'll have that next month. This is the time for the budget. And their budget's in your packet. There have been some minimal changes since the draft that was submitted last month. Again, with the CARES Act 2.1 million, we're able to balance the budget. But just a note that that'll be the end of the CARES Act after FY22. So on the revenue side, again, as you can see, the actual 20 revenues were around 10 million. After the pandemic, our FY21 budget was revised down to 5.5 million. However, based on the most updated information we have from the current year, we're looking at a $7.6 million revenue, again, including 2.1 from CARES Act. On the expense side, backing up, the FY20 was actual 9.3 million. Revised COVID was 9.4 because of additional expenses we had to incur. We're proposing a $10 million budget for 22, and that's driven primarily by backfilling various positions that we've deferred over the years: the security terminal coordinator, the operations position, the maintenance supervisor, as well as increased professional services associated with PFAS. We're also requesting 2 additional management positions, one of which will be essentially a wash because we're looking at modifying another agreement that would fill that position by taking some services back from a contractor. And the other would be a general management position for oversight of day-to-day maintenance and operations. So with the revenue at 7.6 million, expenses at 10 million, we're projecting a negative net earnings of 2.5, which would be covered through the standard 400,000 Pfc transfer and 2.1 million CARES Act money. Our retained earnings have been certified, and as of July 1, 2020, they're $2.889 million. And I have to give kudos again to Jamie, because if you recall, in her prior calculations, it was 2.9 million. So it's very, very close to where she projected the fund balance to be. Additionally, as I mentioned previously, we're looking at a $1.2 million balance in the fuel revolver, but we're going to need probably at least $1 million of that for the project, which I'll go into later in the meeting. We're also looking to continue to fund the Stabilization Fund that was initially on the agenda for warrant articles last year, but due to COVID, there are a number of warrant articles that were passed on, and that was one of them. So we're going to be looking at making a recommendation to transfer that money later this year. Pfc balance has been updated through September 30th, and for FY21, the ending balance is projected to be 1.39 million. Also in your packet is a Pfc audit, which identifies the history of that and where we stand. And just another note, the debt service for the Pfas will be a ban in FY22, and then long-term debt service carried into beginning in FY23. And that's currently at the, I believe it's $6 million plus that we're looking at. So we're hoping to try to reduce that through other sources if we can bring some more income in. That's the budget, and we're seeking your approval of that this evening. We have a meeting set up with town later this week, and then it has to go through the select board process, and I believe it's FinCom too. So,
Can I just make one note that we lowered the PFC to 250 this year because of how low our PFC.
the Reliance, okay.
Yeah, instead of 400, lowered that for this year because our
Okay,
collections are going to be so low. And
so that's something I meant to, and I did this before, to give you a heads up, get on your radar. Because of the impact of PFAS on the employments and decrease, we're not going to we're going to be very judicious on how we transfer money out of that, because we're not going to have much left if we keep going. It's going to catch up to us. There's a lag time of a year or two. So as Jamie just indicated, we reduced the amount of reliance on that this year.
Are there any questions or comments?
No.
I think Arthur has one.
Did I understand that right? That the PFC being charged has been reduced?
No.
Okay.
The amount that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but the amount that we transfer from the PFC fund into our operating budget to offset the loss.
Thank you.
Correct. We're just lowering it this year because our collections are down, and also that debt was refinanced. So our expenses are going to be lower towards that, and we have to, it's a reimbursement to ourselves. So just to make sure we don't overextend ourselves there, we lowered it this year.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, observations, I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal 22 budget as submitted.
So moved.
There's a second. Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
You're in the fog below the bridge, Ms. Topham.
I'm aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
Thank you, and great job, Jamie. We just discussed the certified retained earnings. As I mentioned, they were certified at 2.889, but just a note that is down from our previous certified retained earnings of 3.58 million. So
Well, considering how the year ended up, it's amazing where they were.
yeah, well, we're going to see how this year turns out, because we got a hard hit in the summer. Next is a supplemental appropriation number 2 for the fuel farm. I referenced this a little bit earlier. As you know, we received bids that were quite a bit higher than we anticipated. So we'd like to request to the Capital Committee and through town meeting, adding $1.5 million to a previously approved FY22 capital request. The current proposed funding sources would be $1 million from the fuel revolver, retained earnings of $201,678, and a borrowing authorization of $300,000. That would increase the borrowing up to a total of $800,000 if it's necessary. Hopefully, if we can get more money into the fuel revolver, we won't have to borrow as much, and that's what the objective is to try to keep the debt service as low as possible, because as we discussed a little bit earlier, we're going to be very PFAS heavy in debt going into the out years. So we want to try to keep that down to a minimum. And again, this is a project, as I mentioned, that is very critical to our income. Now, what has also been discussed, this is another perfect example of the issue of the home rule petition. And the example I'll use is that we are using the numbers based on the bids that we received previously. Should they come in higher, then we are going to have to adjust this at town meeting. And in discussion with with Brian Turbot, he had suggested that we take bids in the window where I believe it's 45 days that they can only hold bids. So we would take the bids. If in fact we needed additional money, we would then do a technical amendment on the floor at ATM. If not, this project again would be delayed another year. And we're already probably a year and a half behind schedule with this, and it's critical. It's this is again to refurbish the plumbing, the cabinets, the pumps on the fuel farm, as well as the fire suppression system. We had approached the fire chief and said, hey, can we defer the fire suppression for another year to try to break this up if we get in a bind? And he said, no, we've already deferred it long enough. We really need to get that done. So he's not inclined to support that law. So I'd like to ask the commission's approval to move forward with this request of a second supplemental of $1.5 million. The detail is in your packet, and essentially it reads, I kind of read it from the right to the left. It has the initial appropriation, the first supplemental, then it has the total and what is going to be needed for the second supplemental. So I'd ask your permission to move forward with that capital request.
Are there any comments? Questions? Is there a motion to approve the supplemental budget of $1.5 million for the fuel farm?
So moved.
I'll make, oh. Second,
Thank you. Anything else from anybody? Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, the passenger facility audit. I mentioned that earlier, and everything is in good order, and I think that's indicative of very good work by both Jamie and our consultant from McFarland Johnson. So very well done audit, but again, we're dropping down the amount that we're collecting right now, and hopefully we'll get through this COVID business and start getting some traffic back next year. On the Thanksgiving holiday results, the FBO sales were down over last year by 7% or $7,783. Initially, we thought they were higher, but that was just a first blush indication, but it was incorrect. Next, we have targeted salary adjustments. I've looked at other airports and the salaries associated with both the assistant manager's position and the finance manager's position. And the results basically are that our two individuals in those positions are paid below the low and the average salary ranges for those. Based on this information, the details that I provided to the commission previously, I'm looking to increase the finance manager's salary by 9% and the assistant airport managers by 12% over a 2-year period. I would like to also note that the assistant manager was never received a $5,000 increase that he was supposed to be getting when he obtained his accreditation. There was an error for some reason that was never processed. So I'm not quite sure if I need to get commission approval on this, but I would like to bring it to your attention. If there's any objections, I'd certainly like to take that into account.
Any comments, Ms. Topham? Ms. Topham, you're muted.
I'm sorry, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I mentioned, but I'd like to do it over a 2-year period, effective January 1st of 2021. So it would be 4.5 for the finance manager, and then 6 for the assistant manager, and then the same in 2022.
Okay. Ms. Topham?
Yes, I think this year to give that kind of a raise is, I don't know, because everybody's been unemployed and it's just not a good message to the island, I don't believe. So I will be voting against it, much as I appreciate the staff's work and all, but I just don't think that that's something that we could do. I don't even know what the other departments are getting for raises. Have they been decided on negotiations yet or not? I mean, anyhow.
That's a topic for executive session.
But there is a difference that these are non-union, not negotiated positions.
I understand that. But
Okay.
anyhow, thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anyone who thinks we need to take a vote on this?
I'm going to
Here.
vote no, just so you need to know that, if you want to know that.
I think we should support the manager's opinion with a vote.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion?
I'll move to support Dan Rafter's recommendation to increase salaries as he just recommended.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Just for discussion purposes, I would add that I will vote in favor of this. But it's really, I appreciate that for two reasons, really. One, I think that it really is Mr. Rafter's decision, and I appreciate him informing the commission, and I want to support the manager and how he chooses to operate the airport, subject to us then reviewing him. And I appreciate him informing us, and I appreciate that I certainly have shared Ms. Topham's sentiment and concerns with current state of economy. The fact that that Mr. Rafter is making this adjustment over a 2-year period helps to alleviate that concern for me. Thank you.
We ready for a vote? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
No.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you very much. It's okay to move into the manager's report, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, Taxiway Echo, this project's been shut down for the season with a portion of phase 2 remaining closed. This is due to some subsurface issues that were uncovered. We've been working closely with FAA and MassDOT and their engineers to develop a plan, a three-pronged approach. One is to open a portion of the phase 2 that we could to minimize the operational impacts, and that's been accomplished. Second part was to investigate thoroughly the extent of the subsurface problems that exist at Taxiway Echo and Alpha intersection. Our consultant was aware and worked in that area before and took into account in the design a significant amount of coverage, but the problem apparently has migrated further. So we don't want to continue to put good money after bad. FAA has indicated that it may not be eligible and it may be eligible. They're not quite sure, but we're in the $400,000 to $500,000 range right now. And again, this plan was basically formulated with FAA more than encouragement. They worked to develop this plan. And the third prong would be to develop a more thorough testing in subsequent phases to avoid or at least be able to address any future potential issues that may exist. There's a challenge with the testing protocol, as I understand it, and I'll be honest with our consultants, I conferred with another company, and they basically said, yeah, this is a problem that a lot of people have had in terms of the testing that the FAA recommends, that it should be more thorough and some other work. So we're working closely with Jacobs to develop this. I have to give kudos to Noah, Preston Harriman, and Kelly Slazarski from FAA. They all worked very late Wednesday before Thanksgiving to get that section open of the project and coordinated with air traffic control, who did a great job helping us too. So that project is moving, but there's a little bit of a bump in the road right now. The security project phase 2 is underway. Conduits being installed in the terminal and FBO buildings. Fuel farm rehabilitation, we just went over. The EAR, we discussed the ALP change, and for non-standard geometry issues, the scope of work is at FAA and MassDOT for review. And on hangar development, we've submitted to the town request for a warrant article to allow us to go to 40-year terms for development of hangars. And we're working with a number of different potential opportunities there. On the RFP and bid status, we discussed earlier the repackaging of the fuel farm and the timing of that. We've sent out the letters canceling the initial offering. We have an RFP for Bunker Road #2. It's actually available tomorrow. Proposals are due in January 8th. We are reviewing bids that we received for an aircraft tug. And we're also working with our consultant to develop a RFP for a long-term maintenance program of the security system. And we're also working with the town on developing or addressing some issues with current bylaws relating to rental cars. And once that's addressed, we'll be creating an RFP for the airport operators. There's one other item, and it sounds a little back to the future, if you will, or whatever. The Delta fields, we've reviewed the current situation there, and it appears from our files that there was never a land release request submitted to FAA for that parcel. And as part of the land release request, I need to affirm that the commission has approved changing the use from an aeronautical to a non-aeronautical. So I'd like to ask for permission for the commission to approve that change. And again, it's kind of retroactive, and we're going to be open with FAA. We've talked to them already, but we just have to update and get all the paperwork in line and in order. We have to get a current license agreement. The old one's expired, but before we do that, I have to get this FAA document approved. So I'd like to ask the approval of the commission to convert the Delta field land from aeronautical to non-aeronautical use.
Are there any questions specifically on that? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve changing the status of the Delta Fields property from aeronautical to non-aeronautical use.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Thank you. Just quickly on the operations update, operations is working with FAA to review various documents virtually as part of a virtual certification inspection. NOAA has been working with FAA to obtain a Category 1 special authorization for runway 24, which will lower the minimums for pilots operating in instrument flight conditions. And operations and maintenance continues work on preparing for the snow season. We are also working on some drainage concerns with the Taxiway Echo. The contract will be out here tomorrow to look at that. JetBlue will be discontinuing their service January 3rd. And again, I'd just like to thank NOAA and Preston and the FAA for the work they did around Thanksgiving to get the portion of Taxiway Echo open. And we're also working to coordinate with air traffic control and updating the lighting control touchscreen in the tower. On statistics, unfortunately, Dave is on vacation and I messed up and didn't assign that to someone, but I do have just some a little snapshot of our fuel.
Excuse me, before you get into that, Mr. Rafter, could I ask NTV to turn the chat function on YouTube? And Mr. Gasparo, will you monitor that, please?
Sure, 1 second, I'll do that.
Yes.
And
So
a reminder to the public, once you're in the chat, you have to, or to get in the chat, you have to refresh your browser.
Okay,
Oh.
chat has been enabled.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Rafter. Excuse me for interrupting.
no, thank you. Briefly, November fuel sales were up 31% or $79,450 over last November. However, year to date, the sales are down 15% or $1.3 million. So we're seeing progress coming back, but we have a lot of catch up to do. On the gallon side of it for November, they're up 60%, but year to date, they're still down 6%. Avgas gallons were down in November 21% and year to date down 18%. So again, we're seeing some progress moving backwards. It's a very different cycle that we're not accustomed to, a longer season, if you will. So we're seeing good signs, but at the same time, we have a long way to catch up. And one other note on the personnel side of the house, we have hired a new FBO customer service representative. Her name is Fiona Johnson, and she'll be working downstairs with the crew, and look forward to her success. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Any comments for Mr. Rafter?
I had a question.
Mr. Gasparo?
Could you give us a little more detail on the car rental situation that you mentioned? I watched the select board meeting last week, and it seemed there was some
Yeah,
confusion.
so I've been in contact with the town manager subsequent to that, and we're working to put together a meeting with the town. I think their licensing department has some concerns, as well as our legal. And I think that there's more information that would need to be provided to the select board on this matter. So that's why we're going to get together internally and work out the details. But it comes down to right now, the current bylaw has a cap of 700 on it, of which all appear to be spoken for, if you will. And there's one recommendation we have of removing that cap completely. The logic behind this is that if we were to put out our 3 operators' positions, and if we elect to select someone differently from an incumbent, a new entrant, the new entrant could be precluded from operating because they cannot obtain the necessary medallion.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, an issue of possibly the cap, but also the allocation of the medallions and the ownership and so on and so forth. So there's a number of those type of things that we need to work through with both town administration and council, as well as our council. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I'm also wondering, when will what will the commission's involvement be in this? And will we be seeing a draft of a bylaw before it's actually?
Yes. So the town managers indicated that because the meeting has been pushed back to June, that we have a little bit of time, and she's looking to set up a meeting in January where we can discuss. We have presented to town council 2 very rough draft warrant articles, and I think that's going to be the starting point to address not only our concerns, but then we also we've heard from the licensing administrator that they have some other concerns. So we want to try to incorporate those in as well. So
Her concerns parallel ours, but for perhaps different reasons.
for the
Right.
most part, yes. Yeah. So I don't have an exact date, Arthur, of the meeting in January, but I would assume, yes, we would present a draft warrant article, for the commission's consideration before we put, we're putting it on as a placeholder right now. We're trying to get it in there. The select board initially, based on discussion and information they had at the time, was talking about moving this on to the FY20 or the following year ATM. And we're hoping that we can try to get something accomplished before then.
Thanks. So likely an agenda item for the next meeting?
Yeah, I think our meeting is what, the 10th or is it?
12th, the 12th.
So hopefully we could have a meeting prior to that with the town, yeah. But again, there's a lot of moving parts, so I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to have everything answered, but certainly have an update, and before it's finalized for the warrant, we would have the commission approve.
Thank you.
Can you explain a little bit more about the medallions, how they're handed out and on all of that, please?
I can try, but I am probably wrong in this.
Well, give me a little bit of a hint.
My understanding is, the way I read the bylaw, that they're based on the listing of vehicles that the companies had submitted in a particular year, and you pay $100 for the medallion, I think, per car. But it's not a use it or lose it. It's you can essentially continue to purchase medallions but not use them and maintain control of that medallion. And I think that's where one of the sticking points may be. We're not certain that all of the operators are using all of the medallions. There's one in particular that has a large number of them, or how they're being used. So there's just some cleanup work I think needs to be done. And if you look at the history in the bylaw, going back, there were a number of years where, and I forget the terminology, but they were waiting on development of some overall strategic plan, not strategic, but a comprehensive plan of some sort. And then eventually in one of the town meetings, I want to say it was 2003 or so, that whole thing was removed. So it appeared that the initial bylaw was a transitional type bylaw, but it never got finalized, if you will. So we just need to look at details on that one.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Are there any commissioners' comments?
Well, I had an appointment with a doctor today, and he was talking about how he is so upset with Cape Air that he's now using the High Line because which we've heard. So I was just going to reiterate, he says you can sit there for 2 hours and they won't call you when the plane comes in, or they'll book a plane, and if there's only one person, they won't do it. So anyhow, he was just explaining that to me today, his dissatisfaction with Cape Air.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Gasparo, did you have something, or did you have your hand up? No? Okay. All right. Is there any public comment, Mr. Gasparo?
There's not.
Thank you. All right, NCTV, you can close the public comment then. Thank you. And I will entertain a motion now to go into executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review the executive session minutes as enumerated for possible release, and to review the minutes of November 10th, 2020 for review and possible release.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'm sorry, if I may, with your permission, I'd like to ask that Noah join us in executive session for a presentation.
that's fine. Anybody objections?
No?
Okay, thank you. Under Clause B, Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding the Gatto claim where the chair has determined an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. I'm sorry. There are two other items. One of them relates to
Collective bargaining
no,
and
yeah, to
claims
discuss. I got it.
against manufacturer PFAS.
I have it. Thank you. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining where the chair has determined that open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. And under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to pursuing legal claims against the manufacturer of polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, where the chair has determined an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Lasden. Thank you, Mr. Darris.
Are we to sign out of this and then come back, or just stay on?
We'll just stay on.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
And Dan, if
So,
For the-
Mark, 1 second before we start. So, Mark, if you could log off and you could leave me the host.
Sure, no problem. And we're gonna,
Thanks.
so we're stopping the live streaming, right?
Yes, please stop the live streaming.
And the YouTube, well, I guess that's the
Yep, you
YouTube,
got it.
isn't it? Yeah, okay.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mr. Chairman,